I showed up to my daughter's lavish wedding anniversary only to hear, "Go back, you are not wanted here." Then my son-in-law called security and said, "Throw this useless man out. He is a nobody." So I left quietly and called my lawyer. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Joe Andrews from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I never liked showing up uninvited to anything. Not parties, not barbecues, not even family gatherings, not since I was a teenager. But that night, I made an exception. 10 years of marriage is no small thing, and despite the distance that had crept in between me and my daughter over the years, I still believed there was a place for me in that celebration. Maybe not at the front table, maybe not in the spotlight, but surely somewhere in the back. Somewhere I could quietly sit, watch her laugh in her white and gold gown, and feel like I still mattered to her, that I still belonged. I wore my best suit, the navy one she used to say made me look presidential. I stopped by the florist on the way and bought a modest bouquet of lilies, her mother's favorite. I figured it was symbolic. A bridge, maybe, or a reminder that no matter how much time had passed or what we hadn't said to each other, I still carried both of them, her and her mother, with me in everything I did. I pulled up to the venue, some fancy rooftop place with gold-accented windows and valet parking. The kind of spot people chose to impress, not to connect. I wasn't 2 steps inside the marble-floored lobby before I felt eyes on me. Waitstaff in pressed uniforms, guests in glittering dresses and tailored suits, all talking softly over champagne. Nobody smiled. A few glanced my way, then looked away like I didn't belong. I found the welcome table, scanned for her name. Isabel and Marcus, 10-year anniversary extravaganza. A giant printed canvas of their wedding photos stood nearby, and I remember pausing to look at it. Isabel's smile was wide, but her eyes looked just a little vacant. I wondered if that was hindsight talking. I took the elevator up to the main room, nerves twisting in my gut. My hands were starting to sweat. The doors opened to chandeliers, live violinists, and 100 people who looked like they belonged to a different world than the one I raised her in. A server passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. I held the bouquet like a shield and scanned the room for her. Then I saw her. Isabel, my daughter, 10 years married, hair swept up in a classy chignon, laughing with some man in a navy tux I didn't recognize. And standing right beside her, Marcus, her husband. He saw me first. He nudged her. She turned. Our eyes met. There was a pause, a flicker of something I couldn't name. Recognition, maybe. Then came the words I would never forget. "Go back," she said coldly, her voice slicing through the music like a snapped violin string. "You are not wanted here." The room fell quiet around me. A few heads turned. I stood there frozen, like a child being scolded in public, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Marcus stepped forward, sneering. "Security," he barked, turning to a man in a black suit nearby. "Throw this useless man out. He's a nobody." I didn't speak. I didn't beg or defend myself. I just nodded once, slowly. My throat burned. I handed the flowers to the security guard. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. And let him escort me back to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Isabel turning her back to me, already re-immersed in conversation as if I were just some rude guest crashing a party. As if I hadn't raised her. As if I hadn't sacrificed every dream I ever had to give her the life she now used to distance herself from me. I walked to my car in silence. The valet handed me the keys without meeting my eyes. The bouquet had been discarded in the trash can by the front door. White lilies, crushed. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time. The city lights blurred through the windshield. Something hollow opened up in my chest. Not just heartbreak, but the sudden, irreversible shift of realizing your child doesn't see you as her father anymore. Not really. Not when it matters. I had worked my whole life to give her the life she had. And tonight, that life had no room for me. I drove home on autopilot. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. My phone rang once, my sister. I ignored it. When I walked into my study, I didn't take off my coat. I didn't pour a drink. I just sat down, pulled out my leather folder, and dialed my lawyer's number. Remove Isabel from the will, I said calmly when he picked up. Effective immediately. There was a pause. Are you sure? He asked gently. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He didn't press. Just said he'd take care of it, and hung up. Then I picked up my other phone. The private line. The one I used for business matters. I dialed the head of HR at a company called Weston Dynamics, the same one Marcus worked for. The same one I'd quietly purchased majority stake in 3 years ago. He didn't know that, of course. He just thought he worked for a nameless boardroom full of old men in suits. Terminate Marcus Lively, I said. No severance. I'll sign whatever paperwork you need tonight. My voice didn't shake. It was like I'd been rehearsing those words my whole life. I stared out the window into the dark, a silence settling over me that felt like a blanket. Heavy. Final. I didn't sleep that night. The kind of insomnia that doesn't feel anxious or restless. It just sits with you, like a ghost in the corner of the room. I lay on top of the covers, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. The house was silent, and I realized how long it had been since it truly felt like a home. Without Isabel's voice echoing through the halls, or her laughter bouncing off the walls, it was just space. Cold, curated space. Too clean, too still. By the time the sun started to rise, I had already showered, shaved, and dressed. I stood by the window, mug in hand, watching as the sky turned from black to a dirty gray. I thought about how often I'd stood at that window over the years, waiting for her to come home from parties or school dances. I remembered how I'd once paced for hours after she called crying from college, worried about failing a class. Back then, she called me for everything. I was her person. Funny how quickly the roles reversed. Or maybe they didn't reverse at all. Maybe I was always disposable, just the scaffolding she needed until her new life could stand on its own. Around 8 a.m. I called Harold, my lawyer of 20 years. He answered on the first ring. The man knew when a call was serious. He always had that uncanny intuition, like a bloodhound for broken trust. Morning, Mr. Landon, he said, using the formal tone he saved for business calls. I need to finalize the amendment we discussed last night. Remove Isabel completely. I want her out of the estate, out of the trust, and I want the new documents couriered to me by end of day. There was a pause. Polite, measured. Do you want to consider a partial reduction first? Sometimes time gives. No? Time gave me enough chances to be discarded by my own daughter. I'm done. He cleared his throat. Understood. I'll draft the new paperwork this morning. We'll send a courier to your home for signatures by 3. I hung up without another word. I wasn't in the mood for comfort. Comfort felt dishonest. It wasn't just the inheritance she lost. It was the college fund I'd set aside for her future children, the vacation home in Maine she loved as a girl, the classic Mustang she begged me to restore together. All of it, gone in one brutal motion, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. I couldn't keep giving pieces of myself to someone who saw me as worthless. Still, there was an ache in me that morning, deep, dense, and shameful. The ache of a father choosing to cut off his own child. No amount of money or legal paperwork could cauterize that kind of wound. I kept wondering if her mother would have handled it differently. Softer. Maybe. But she wasn't here. Cancer had taken that option from both of us. I opened the drawer where I kept the original trust paperwork. A photo was tucked inside, one I hadn't seen in years. Isabel on her 8th birthday, frosting on her nose, sitting on my shoulders as we both laughed into the camera. Her tiny hands were curled in my hair, and her eyes were so full of joy that I had to look away. That photo didn't belong in this house anymore. I slid it into an envelope and sealed it. I didn't throw it away. Not yet. But I also didn't put it back in the drawer. It went into the back of the filing cabinet, behind tax returns and utility bills. Out of sight. Like me, apparently. By midday, the courier arrived. A young woman in a gray windbreaker with a polite smile. She handed me the documents, unaware of the weight she carried in that manila envelope. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where Isabel used to do her homework, and began to sign. Each stroke of the pen felt heavier than the last. When I reached the final signature line, name of beneficiary removed, Isabel L. Landon, my hand hovered for a second. Then I pressed down. Firm. Unapologetic. She made her choice. Now I made mine. Later that afternoon, I logged into the internal management portal for Weston Dynamics, the company her husband, Marcus, had worked at for 5 years. He started as a project manager, then clawed his way to a senior position, always loud about his wins and invisible during failures. He had no idea I was the controlling stakeholder, the man who'd kept his team funded when other departments were being slashed. I pulled up his file. The termination letter had already been drafted per my request. Just waiting for his signature. I clicked once, twice. Done. And just like that, he was unemployed. No more lavish parties on the company's dime. No more smug meetings where he took credit for other people's work. No more feeding off a name he never even knew paid his salary. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because a man who would humiliate a father in public, who would call an elder a nobody, with champagne in hand and smirk on his face. He didn't deserve the safety my business provided. I was finishing a cup of coffee in my study when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something told me to pick up. Dad. Isabel's voice was trembling. Please. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over us. Marcus had been drinking. I was overwhelmed. She choked on her words. We weren't ourselves. I waited a beat. Let the silence drag long enough for her to feel it. I wasn't drunk, I said. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was just your father, showing up to celebrate your life. And you treated me like a stain on your perfect little evening. I didn't mean to, she started. I cut her off. You didn't mean to say those words, or you didn't mean for me to hear them. There's a difference. I just want to fix it. Please. You're still my dad. That's when it hit me. She still wanted the title, just not the responsibility. She wanted the door left cracked, just in case. And I wasn't doing that anymore. No, Isabel, I said, my voice calm. I stopped being your father the moment you chose to humiliate me in front of strangers. From now on, call me by my name. And please, don't call again. I hung up. For the second time in my life, I orphaned myself. Monday came with a kind of quiet vindication I hadn't expected. There was no parade, no confetti falling from the ceiling. Just a calendar notification on my laptop. Marcus Lively. Termination confirmed. And a brief email from HR stating that the paperwork had been signed, finalized, and delivered. It was 10:07 a.m. when I opened the security footage from the company's executive office floor. I wasn't supposed to have access to those files, not technically, but when you're the man who funds the system, permissions become flexible. There he was, Marcus, swaggering into the building like he owned it. Black suit, mirrored sunglasses, talking into his Bluetooth headset as he passed the front desk without so much as a nod. He was always like that, even at family events. Loud, charming to strangers, dismissive toward anyone he couldn't leverage. That was his talent, really. He made people feel small so he could feel important. I watched as the receptionist, bless her for her professionalism, handed him the envelope. He looked confused at first, even annoyed. Then he opened it. I paused the footage on the exact moment his smirk disappeared. That jaw-drop moment where realization hits like a fist to the gut. The letter was brief. Cold. Final. No cause given. No second chance offered. Just a line at the bottom. Termination effective immediately. Company assets revoked. Building access disabled. He said something to the receptionist. Probably rude, judging by her expression, but she didn't flinch. She just pointed to the elevator and turned back to her computer. A man in security uniform stepped forward from the hallway, just in case he decided to make a scene. Marcus hesitated for a second, then turned on his heel and left. I closed the footage. I didn't feel giddy or triumphant. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity always gets the better of me when the damage has already been done. Hello, Mr. Landon? It was a woman's voice, high-pitched, panicked. Yes. This is Rebecca, Isabel's friend. We met years ago, at her bridal shower. Listen, I'm calling because I think you deserve to hear something. My stomach tightened. I'm listening. She left me a voicemail Saturday night after the party. She'd had a few drinks. She was laughing and she said some things about you. I didn't want to share it, but after everything that's happened, I feel like, send it to me. I said, my voice steady. There was a pause. You sure? Yes. A few minutes later, the message came through. I waited before hitting play. I sat down, braced myself. Then I pressed the button. Isabel's voice, drunk and giggling. He actually showed up, can you believe that? With flowers. Like some sad little man who thought he still mattered. Marcus almost lost it. God, it was hilarious. Honestly, I was this close to telling him he's just a walking checkbook. But Marcus handled it. Told him off like a champ. Had security toss him. You should have seen his face. Pathetic. The message ended. I sat in that chair for what felt like a century. My hand rested over my mouth. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. But something in me, some fragile, invisible string, snapped so cleanly that it made a sound in my chest. Like glass breaking under pressure. I had held on to some illusion, however foolish, that maybe she regretted what happened. That maybe Marcus was the puppet master and she was caught in the storm. But hearing her voice, gleeful, cruel, shattered that fantasy. She wasn't just complicit. She was proud of what she'd done. I didn't want apologies, not anymore. I didn't want explanations or damage control. I wanted silence. I wanted space. For the first time in a long time, I wanted something for myself. I went to the garage and pulled out the box labeled Isabel, Childhood. Inside were art projects from first grade, ballet shoes, report cards, a glitter-covered rock she once gave me with #1dad scrawled on it in marker. I didn't burn them. I'm not that cruel. But I packed them away tighter. Moved the box to the attic. It was no longer part of my daily life. Just another sealed chapter. The next day, I received a text from my sister. You fired Marcus? Isabel's devastated. What the hell are you doing? I didn't respond. Then came another. You're being cruel. He's the father of your future grandkids. And finally, she's still your daughter. That one got to me. I typed, then deleted. Typed again. Finally, I wrote, she was my daughter. Now, she's just someone else's problem. And I meant it. I didn't leave the house for 3 days after that voicemail. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't trust myself to be among people. Grief has a way of turning even the simplest interactions into landmines. The cashier asks how your day is going, and you nearly burst into tears. A neighbor waves, and you look away, afraid of what might slip out if someone dares to ask, how's your daughter? On the 4th day, I needed air. Real air. Not the stale, filtered kind that circulates through a quiet house where no one laughs anymore. I threw on an old denim jacket and drove to a small park near the edge of town, one I hadn't visited in years. It was the kind of place with a cracked walking path, a few forgotten benches, and a pond where kids used to feed ducks. Isabel used to love that pond. I sat on the farthest bench, away from the few joggers and dog walkers who passed by. I needed the illusion of solitude. I needed a place where the echoes of that voicemail wouldn't find me. You look like a man who's either been dumped or just buried someone, a voice said suddenly. I turned, surprised. A woman I vaguely recognized stood beside the bench, holding a leash attached to a golden retriever that looked far too happy for such a somber day. Excuse me, I said. She smiled gently. Sorry, that came out harsh. I'm Maria. I rent the unit above your garage, remember? You gave me the space when my husband left, said something about fresh starts needing solid foundations. I blinked. Maria, right. Yeah, I remember now. How's the job going? Still awful, she said, sitting down beside me without asking. But I'm still standing. You look like you're not. I laughed, bitter and low. My daughter humiliated me in front of 200 people, then laughed about it on a voicemail. I cut her out of my will. Fired her husband. Now the rest of the family thinks I've lost my mind. Maria whistled softly. Well, damn. You weren't kidding. I nodded, exhaling slowly. She used to be everything. My reason for getting up in the morning. After her mother passed, it was just me and her. I built everything for her. And now I'm disposable. She made you disposable, Maria said. There's a difference. Her words landed like a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. She didn't flinch. She didn't say, maybe she didn't mean it, or family is family. She just looked at me, like she saw me. I can't stop thinking about all the things I let slide, I said, voice quieter. The times she canceled our dinners last minute. The way she stopped calling on Father's Day. I chalked it up to life. Busy schedules. But the truth is, she was pulling away, and I just kept pretending it didn't matter. Kept telling myself it would get better. Maria leaned back, her eyes on the pond. We build these versions of our kids in our heads. Perfect, grateful, grounded. But they're their own people. And sometimes, they become strangers. Ugly ones. People say I should forgive her. That I'll regret this. Will you? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought. The nights I spent pacing, the sacrifices, the loneliness of solo parenting. And the way she looked at me at that party, as if I were nothing but an embarrassing relic of her past. No, I said finally. I think what I'll regret is letting her do it again. Maria nodded. Then there's your answer. We sat in silence for a while. Her dog dozed at her feet, the pond rippling in the distance. It was a simple moment, but one that grounded me in a way no amount of therapy or advice ever had. Maria didn't offer false hope. She didn't ask me to reach out or mend fences. She just reminded me that dignity wasn't selfish. That peace came with choosing yourself. When I got home, I stood in the hallway and looked at the photo wall. All the framed memories, vacations, birthdays, dance recitals. Isabel's entire life was etched in those pictures, but none of them were real anymore. They were chapters in a book that ended the night she turned me into a punchline. I took them down one by one, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I wrapped each in newspaper and placed them in a storage bin, replacing them with older photos. Ones with my late wife, old fishing trips with friends, even one of Maria's little boy when he drew me a thank you card last Christmas. These were people who still saw me, who remembered who I was beyond what I could give them. That night, Maria dropped off a casserole. Not a peace offering, she said. Just food. Because grieving is hungry work. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. By the end of the week, the whispers started. At first, they trickled in through mutual friends, those always neutral types who make a show of just wanting peace, but can't help being messengers for chaos. Then the texts started, short, charged, and completely lacking context. Heard about what happened. Are you okay? Isabel's saying it was all a misunderstanding. You know family fights get messy. Don't let this be permanent. The last one came from someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Amazing how quickly people get invested when there's a scandal to dissect. It was clear Isabel was doing damage control. She must have told her version to anyone who'd listen. Probably framed it as me being unstable, or overreacting, or too emotional. Maybe she said I showed up drunk. Maybe she said I yelled. People believe what they want to believe, especially when the lie is more convenient than the truth. Then came the real blow, the Facebook post. I wasn't tagged in it, but someone sent me a screenshot. A photo of Isabel and Marcus at the anniversary party, both smiling like the night had gone off without a hitch. The caption read, "Grateful for a night full of love, friends, and chosen family. Toxicity has no place in our lives anymore. Onward." It was petty, juvenile, but it hit like a gut punch. Not just because of the word toxic, which I knew was meant for me, but because of how quickly she erased me from the story. I wasn't her father anymore. I was just a blemish she'd edited out, a line she cut from the script. People began commenting, gushing over her dress, saying how elegant she looked, and tucked between the compliments were a few subtle nods that twisted the knife. So proud of you for setting boundaries. Cutting off negativity is the ultimate act of self-care. I didn't recognize half the names, but one caught my eye, her godmother. A woman who once promised to help guide Isabel if anything ever happened to me. She'd written, "He was always difficult. You did the right thing, sweetheart." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That night, I sat on my back porch, a blanket around my shoulders, bourbon in hand. The stars were out, faint, but visible. I used to tell Isabel they were her mother's freckles stretched across the sky. She believed that until she was 10. I wish I still believed it. I heard Maria's footsteps before I saw her. She didn't say anything, just sat in the other chair with a beer and stared out at the yard. The quiet between us was comfortable now, like we didn't have to fill the space with apologies or small talk. "Your daughter posted something," she said after a while. I saw it. I unfollowed her. That caught me off guard. You follow my daughter? Did, past tense. She used to post about you all the time. How proud she was. What a great father you were. Now she acts like you were never there. I sipped my drink. Maybe in her mind, I never was. Maria shook her head. Don't do that. Don't let her rewrite the history you bled to build. You were there. You did the work. She just doesn't want to carry the weight of gratitude anymore. That line stuck with me. I spent the next day cleaning out my office. Not the kind of cleaning where you toss papers and vacuum floors, but the emotional kind. I removed the last traces of Isabel from the space. A framed newspaper clipping of her graduation speech. A signed photo from her college internship. Even the sticky note she'd left on my desk years ago that read, "Love you, Dad. Don't forget lunch at 12. I took them all down, boxed them up, labeled the box, past life. I replaced those relics with new things, small, but meaningful. A framed quote Maria gave me. Family is not who you're born to. It's who shows up when it matters. A photo of my wife. A Polaroid Maria's son had taken of us eating spaghetti in the backyard. And a hand-carved wooden paperweight I'd forgotten I even owned. One that simply said, still standing. But the fallout wasn't done with me yet. I got a call from a former friend, Bill Stanton, an old business associate who liked to straddle both sides of the fence. Look, he said, I don't want to get in the middle of this, but Marcus is telling people you had a breakdown. That you're cutting your daughter off because she wouldn't give you money. I barked out a laugh. That's rich. I'm the one who funded their lifestyle. I know. I told him he was out of line. But he's painting you like a bitter old man who got jealous of their success. That one hurt more than I expected. They had success because of me, I said quietly. I gave them everything. And they thanked me with humiliation. I believe you, Bill replied. But not everyone will. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. Not because I was defeated, but because I finally understood. This was the cost of choosing peace. People would spin it, misunderstand it, judge it, but none of that mattered as long as I knew my truth. And I did. I went out to the garden that night, planted a few herbs I'd been meaning to for months, thyme, rosemary, and sage. I used to joke that I had no patience for anything that didn't show results in under a week. But now I wanted to build something slow, something that grew quietly, under the surface, until one day it simply flourished. That's what healing felt like. Not a grand statement. Just soil, sweat, and time. I used to believe that family was permanent. That no matter what mistakes were made, no matter how hard the seasons got, blood would pull you back. It's what I told myself every time Isabel forgot my birthday. Every time she promised to visit and canceled at the last minute. Every time she chose Marcus's opinion over mine, even when it was wrong. I called it loyalty. I called it patience. What it really was fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of admitting I'd lost her long before the anniversary. But the thing about pain is that it doesn't lie. It doesn't dress itself up or whisper sweet excuses. It crashes in, shatters the furniture, and holds up a mirror to the wreckage. And what I saw in that mirror wasn't a bad father. It wasn't a bitter man. It was someone who had loved so fully, so blindly, that he never noticed how empty the other chair at the table had become. 2 weeks had passed since the voicemail, and I hadn't heard from Isabel again. No calls, no texts, just silence. It should have hurt more, but instead it felt like the sun finally rising after a storm you thought might never end. I didn't realize how loud her absence had become until I began living without waiting for her to fill it. That morning, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at the dining room table alone. The paper lay folded in front of me, untouched. The steam from the mug curled into the air, the way my wife used to say spirits moved through quiet rooms. I watched it swirl, and I said out loud, for no one but myself, I'm still here. The doorbell rang just as I took the first sip. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it cautiously. Isabel stood there. She looked different, less polished. Eyes puffy, like she hadn't slept. No makeup. Just a simple black coat and trembling hands wrapped around a small handbag. For a second, we just stared at each other. No words. No soft music in the background. Just real air and real distance. Dad, she whispered. No, I said quietly. Not anymore. She flinched. Please. Can I talk to you? Explain. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. You had your chance, Isabel. You made a decision. Now I'm living with mine. She swallowed hard. I was angry. I was overwhelmed. I didn't mean what I said, any of it. I was trying to protect Marcus. From what? I asked. A father who brought flowers to his daughter's party? Who paid for your wedding? Covered your mortgage for the first 2 years? Built the company your husband bragged about working for? I messed up, she whispered, her voice cracking. You betrayed me. I corrected. You laughed at me. Mocked me. Made me feel like I was something you were ashamed of. I don't need an apology. I need you to understand that some bridges don't get rebuilt. She shook her head, tears sliding down her face. I've lost everything. No, I said, softer now. You lost me. And that's not nothing. That's the consequence of choosing cruelty over kindness. Of choosing silence when you could have spoken up. She looked down, defeated. So this is it. This is me choosing myself, I said. For the first time in my life. I didn't let the conversation linger. I turned, walked back into the house, and closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood there, hand on the knob, feeling the weight lift. That evening, I invited Maria and her son over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti, garlic bread, and a bottle of wine. We laughed. We talked about everything and nothing. At one point, her son asked, "Do you have kids?" I looked at him and said, "I had a daughter once. But some things you can't fix." He nodded solemnly, far too wise for 8. That's okay. We can be your family. I smiled. That'd be nice. Later that night, I stood on the porch, staring out into the quiet. The garden had started to sprout, tiny leaves pushing up through the soil. Proof that even things buried deep could rise again. Maybe not the same. Maybe not as they were. But still alive. Still growing. And so was I. If this story resonated with you. If you've ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace, then drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you have done the same? Have you ever been called toxic for simply setting boundaries? Share your story. And if you believe self-worth sometimes means letting go, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories just like this. See you soon in the next story.